sometimes when you're surfing and there's no waves, and then all of a sudden you get a gut feeling, paddle down the beach that way because a wave
Mhm.
is coming. And the same kind of thing where it was like, we really felt like God said, and I've never heard the audible voice of God, just to be clear, but just those like promptings and those nudgings from
Sure.
him. Um, paddle to Austin because I'm bringing a wave, and I don't
Mm.
make the wave. I'm making the wave, but I do need some churches to go catch it. I need I need some churches to go catch the wave, and we've seen nothing but evidence for that since getting here.
Doug, it's so great to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Wendy. I'm honored to be here. Been looking forward to it. So
Absolutely. Well, I have been a huge fan of Red Rocks Austin since the beginnings. You probably know that.
oh yeah, 100%.
But I'm just excited to share more of your story and share with listeners that maybe not know who you are or who Red Rocks is. But why don't we start with a little bit about who is Doug? Where do you call home? And maybe
Yeah.
something that people don't know about you on social media.
Okay, deal. Well, that's so many things because I probably should post more on social media than I actually do. But I live in Austin. I actually feel like I have 3 homes because grew up a lot back and forth between Colorado and Southern California. And 5 years ago, moved to Austin with my wife when she was 8 months pregnant, and a big group of friends from Denver to start a church in Austin, Texas. So that is now our 3rd home, and both of my kids have since been born in Austin, so they're officially Texans, and so I feel like that gives me a little bit more Texas cred. But yeah, that's where I live right now, and I started following Jesus in college, and he completely changed every like detail in my life. I always say he ruined my life in
Mm.
the best possible way, but I was not planning on being a pastor. If you were to tell me 15 years ago I'd be a pastor and a church planner, I would laugh at you. I had other big dreams of medical school and wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon for some kind of sports team, and was
Wow.
pursuing that at full steam, and then got an opportunity to try ministry for a year, the year after I graduated from undergrad. And a few weeks into it, realized I was made for this, and
Mm.
I'm called to this, and I haven't looked back since. And that was about 2010. And so here we are 13 years later, and have gotten to be part of some pretty cool ministry stories in that amount of time. And yeah, believe God's still just getting started with it.
I love it. I definitely can't wait to share with listeners a little bit more about a lot of those adventures. I probably won't bring up all of them, but I want to back up to BC, like before Christ days. And it's so fun to hear you guys bring in elements of like your college days when you were
Hmm.
freshly in love with God, or you thought this is how roommate situations are, or I had laughed at a recent illustration. Somebody was talking about, yeah, you just kind of do your own thing and you can come home and lift weights at 10 p.m. at night. And
Right. And it's encouraged, when you're in college living with your buddies. So
totally. And no respecter of time. And, just having a family now for you, obviously a lot of things have changed, but can you share a little bit about like in those college days, what gripped your heart enough for Jesus to be like, I want to go all in on this?
oh man, that's a good question. I feel like I've always been an all-in kind of guy.
Mm.
That's just sort of my personality type. Whatever I'm doing, I'm going to go for it. And so before Jesus and before God got a hold of my life, that was just, let's go all in for the world. And so 3 out of 4 years of college are defined by that. And
Mhm.
even getting to go on a journey with Ryan and Ethan, who I lead this church with today, who were my roommates all through, for most of college.
Mhm.
Um, Realizing that alongside of them, of like, how do we go from living in this party house at the University of Colorado, the year it's the #1 party school in the entire nation, to then all of a sudden the 3 of us, God just grabs us, like he grabs our hearts so much, and
Wow.
I think fills us with purpose for maybe like the first time of a story that's way bigger than us. And I'm very, very blessed and lucky that I got to go on this journey basically from the beginning, with brothers. And you have to follow Jesus for yourself, You're not made to follow Jesus by yourself.
Mhm.
And so it's very much been me following Jesus for myself, but I've been very fortunate to get to not do it alone and get to do it next to two guys who our timing is just kind of crazy with revelations God's given us. And from first grabbing us to realizing I'm called to ministry to realizing at the same time we're called to start a church and getting to walk through the last, just over a decade with my
Wow.
best friends. And so I've always been a passionate guy, and those guys also. And so I think realizing if this whole God thing is real, and I believe with all my heart it is, then there's nothing else that I can give my life to, because
Mm.
this life, by definition, compared to eternity, is so quick and so short. And so let's use the years that God gives us and the breath that's in our lungs to go all out to reach as many people as possible in this life. And so uh,
Yeah.
I have no idea, like, if medicine, will be part of my future again. Every time I seem to make plans, God has always just changed plans. And so I know now than to, even on a podcast, say, like, Wendy, I'm doing ministry for the rest of my life. Because as soon as I make big, bold statements like that, God just changes things up on me. But right
Sure.
now, from my seat, I'm a church builder. I'm a church planner and a church builder, and I get to do it with my best friends.
That's so cool. What an honor, especially to get to do it next to your best friends and your brother. And, you didn't have to move to some random podunk town to be like, I'm suffering for Jesus. Like,
Right. I mean, yeah, I've learned, like, how people do this alone. I think I would rather lose as a team than win by myself. So,
mm,
um, even more than winning by myself, I'd rather, swing for the fences with my friends and
yeah,
family and miss. And so I don't know how people do this by themselves. It is the hardest thing I've ever done, planting and building a church. And so I'm very fortunate to
yeah,
not have to do it alone. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's interesting that you say it's the hardest thing you've ever done because right after college, and I'm sure a handful of people know this, a handful of people have probably watched your film. You and Ethan, there was 4 of you guys, right? That you guys took off on a
Mhm.
year
Yep.
journey.
Yep.
Tell
Sure.
us a little bit about that.
Well, that was actually the very first dream that we've had with each other. It was shortly after starting to follow Jesus. I remember there's this scenic overlook in Boulder where, this is going to sound so college for a second, but you drive your car up there and at sunset and look over all of Boulder and contemplate God and the existence of the meaning of everything. And it was funny because me and Ethan were both having bad days.
Mm,
We both asked girls on dates and got rejected earlier that day, I believe. And so we showed up back at our house just both upset. And we said, you know what, let's just go for a drive. And not really knowing, like, still new to faith, we just grabbed our Bibles and hopped in his Ford Explorer and drove up to that spot and just sat on the roof of his car and came back down about 3 hours later with this dream that we feel like was from God, that we're going to get some guys together and we are going to, the year after we graduate, we're going to spend a whole year traveling the world, going to different
wow,
countries, and we'll help and serve in any way that we possibly can. And we'll make a film about it. And so,
wow,
we were in his car. We drove back down to the house. And before we got out of the car, we shook hands, looked each other in the eye and said, we're doing this. This is not just one of those things that you talk about because you get all hyped for a night, but then it fades away because it's unrealistic. We are doing this.
wow,
And we saw it through. Like, we started just getting connections with different organizations and pastors and missionaries and churches all over the world. And emails started coming back. People from, like, an organization from Burundi saying, we could use you. Can you come, at this time? From India, hey, you can live with my wife and I. They're pastors in India. Can you come,
cool,
for June? And it was so cool how everything almost started piecing together like a puzzle. And 1 year itinerary almost basically got laid out for us of organizations all over the planet that said, can you be here? Can you be here then? And so we raised money for it and bought some cameras. And January 5th, 2012, at LAX, boarded a flight to Haiti. And that's where it all started. And then got back at the end of December 2012 after going all over the world. And I think it was about 8 countries for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. And it was incredible on so many levels. I was doing a long distance relationship with Sam, who's now my wife, but she was my new girlfriend at the time.
Wow.
Yep. And made a film about it, got to be part of so many cool things. But then also, it's funny how you look back and then you can see what God was up to. It
Mhm.
wasn't just about the trip, but that year prepared us to plant a church together years later because of the amount of humility and the amount of things we went through together. We left as friends, we came back as brothers, and we came back as like a family, as a team, rooting for each other. There was zero competition between us on who
That's
leads things and who gets to speak more, and who it all just became. I'm the biggest fan of my best friends, and when they win, I win because the church gets built and the kingdom wins. And it was kind of like being married for that whole year because
wow.
we go to bed at night and these guys are the last guys I see. Wake up in the morning and they're the first guys I see, and you can't get away. And so if there's
Yeah.
problems, you don't just take 3 days apart. You just deal with it. And we dealt with thing after thing after thing, and God was using that for us to years later be able to take a what I think was like a bigger leap of faith, to leave everything and leave jobs and sell homes and pack U-Hauls and move to a city none of us had ever lived in before, and start a church because we felt like an invisible God inaudibly told us to, and it got
Yeah.
us prepared for that. And so,
That is so cool.
yeah, so it was the trip in and of itself was incredible, but then also what it prepped us for and led to.
Absolutely. And so many people don't get that experience at such a young age. Like
Right.
they experience this midlife crisis in their 30s or 40s or even 50s going, God, what have I dedicated my life to? And now I want to go serve you overseas or wherever. And to
Yeah.
get to experience that freshly into your relationship with God, like how awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I think we knew maybe we'll just have our midlife crisis like early, let's get it out of the way now while we don't have kids and while there's not huge responsibilities. Let's
Sure.
go, if we're going to go all out for this thing, let's do it now, because we had just all started reading the Bible for ourselves and loved the book of Acts. And we're like, it just
Mm,
seems like Jesus said we're supposed to go into the world and tell people about him. So for one year, let's do to the best of our ability what we think that means with everything that
wow.
we got. And also humbling too, because we're young guys just out of college, brand new to our faith, and you think you're under the impression we're going to change the world, man. We're going to go every city we land in, we're going to change this city. Like there's going to be revival that breaks out. And we learn quickly the world already has a savior and it's not any of us.
Sure.
And as far as strategy goes, there's people that were on the ground in each of those cities and countries already that had been there for a long time. And after we left, they'd be there for a long time. And so the way we could have the most impact was going and supporting them and what they're doing. And
Yeah.
so that was humbling also of
Yeah.
thinking we're going to change the world and coming back and realizing God's got this and we get to play a small part. And
Absolutely.
so the part that we can play, let's do it with everything we got.
Totally.
Mhm.
And even just a side note on that, like I remember being in India walking past a well in the middle of like it was late spring when we were there and it was crazy hot and it's like talk about the Bible coming to life. Like you see a well on a road in the middle of the day and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is what the Samaritan woman by the well
Right.
experienced." And so many people that take trips to other countries are like, "We're going to go bless this community." And oftentimes we're the ones that end up being like greater, like the impact
Absolutely.
is greater on our end.
Yep. Absolutely.
And
Oh, it's so true. It's like even flying home. I remember flying back we finished in Cape Town. We finished in South Africa and we spent like a week in Cape Town just doing some fun things and resting, and then flying back to Denver on our last flight of that year. I remember journaling and looking out the window because I thought like, man, I'm going to be a missionary for the rest of my life,
mm,
craziest places ever, and realized God is calling me to fire some people up back home and rally as many people as possible to start living like they're part of a bigger story, whether that means crossing an ocean or just crossing the street, building the local church or starting a nonprofit, or it doesn't have to look like quitting your job and doing this whole new adventure. It can, like, what does it look like for you to be a light where God has you? And my calling, at least right now, is can I fire you up for that?
Yeah.
And yeah. And so it was
Yeah.
cool flying on January away from the US, thinking God is calling me overseas and this is going to be my life now, to December later that year coming back and going, I got a job to do here. Yeah.
Well, okay, well, let's dive into this job to do here. You served for a while with Red Rocks Church here in Denver,
Hmm.
and then eventually felt the call to start a church of your own. And if I recall right, I love the story that you shared, which I'd love for you to share with listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with how Red Rocks Austin got started.
Hmm.
How were you were going to call Sean, the lead pastor of Red Rocks Denver, and say, "This is my calling, I quit," or and Sean calls you, right?
Yeah.
Can you share, like,
Yeah.
clearly I just
Well,
butchered that story, but
yeah, he always knew that I was pretty honest with him from day one that, "Hey, man, I've got dreams. Me and my friends have this dream and this calling, and the timing's not right yet, but we have a calling to one day start a church, and I want you to know that just from the very beginning," to which I can tell you more about that convo also. It was incredible, his reaction to it. But we always thought that we would move to San Diego and start Harbor City Church. That was the name. I still have a thumb drive that has all the vision, some videos, some graphics, some
wow.
logos, and all of that kind of stuff, and I just keep it for fun. But we fell in love with Red Rocks, and I remember the first time I ever went to Red Rocks Church was a Sunday night, in the back of a Red Barn campus in the back of a creepy theme park in Golden, Colorado, and I called the guys right after that on the way home, and I said, "I found the church we're gonna copy one day. When we go start a church, I found the church we're gonna copy, at least like 98% of it, you know? And then through some really cool God conversations and connections, found myself working there halfway through 2014. I actually got married in June of 2014. And then we decided on our honeymoon that I would start working for Red Rocks as a young adult pastor, which I started the
Wow.
next month. And so I've been with Red Rocks the same amount of time as I've been married, since summer of 2014.
Wow.
And for 4 years in Denver, helped with the young adult ministry. And then in 2016, towards the end of it, we were up in the mountains and we were meeting with our same small group. We had a small group in college, right when all of us kind of together. So even more than me, Ryan, and Ethan, like four other guys. And we still try to this day, every year we meet annually somewhere. And
Cool.
so this November, we're going to meet in Keystone and spend 3 days with each other and just have fun and, get real and dig in and pray for each other and all of that stuff. Those guys are a huge gift in my life. Anyways, 2016 in the fall, we were at one of those reunions. And one of the guys, Chris, he challenged us a little bit and he said, "You guys have been talking about church planning for a while now. Do you think you're getting close to the calling of God and the timing of God?" And I think we realized in that moment, I think the timing is here. And I think it's time for us to get really serious about doing this. So we're driving down in the mountains in Ethan's red Jeep. It's me, Ryan, and him, and then Ethan's dog Bowser, that I'm with Bowser in the back of the Jeep. And we're like, but we love Red Rocks so much. Well, what if we called Sean, and it was like light bulbs, like we have this brilliant idea. Let's move to San Diego and start a Red Rocks church, since we believe in this family and this DNA and this culture so much. What if we build, like Sean and his friends, their dream that they've been working on for the last 15 years? What if we built their dream with them?
Mm.
And there's like a divine connection and relationship anyways already. And so we're driving down and getting fired up about it. And I said, okay, as soon as we get home, I'm going to call Sean and I'm going to pitch this idea to him. And 5 minutes away from home, my phone starts ringing or buzzing, and it's Sean. And so I was like, well, that's too weird. And so I
Wow.
answered it. And then he spent the next hour pitching to me that exact same idea. And it was It was crazy. I think we knew that moment, like, well, that answers that question on if we're supposed to start a Red Rocks church or not. Like
Wow.
that was clearly God. And then from that point on, it was just a matter of, well, where do we go? Probably San Diego, but let's just let's go visit San Diego for a week and scout it, whatever that looks like. I have no idea. Let's just go spend a week there and talk to people and go to restaurants and pray and hang out. And we did. And then we thought, well, let's go one more place just so we know it's San Diego,
Mm.
and we just be extra sure. And Austin kept coming up in conversations over
Wow.
and over and over again. None of us had ever even been to Texas at that point. And we thought, well, it was almost annoying how much Austin kept coming up. And so we're like, well, we have to go there just to rule it out. So we go to Austin, and now we're, mid 2017, and we realize like this is where it is so clear we're supposed to come here.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fact that much like Boulder, we all got saved at Boulder, and people tell me all the time, nobody gets saved at CU in Boulder.
Mm.
And I was like, well, we did. Everything about our lives changed. And people say the same thing about Austin and UT's, the UT campus and all of that stuff. And so maybe
Wow.
that had something to do with it. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that that Austin feels like if Denver and Boulder had a baby in Texas, it's Austin.
Totally.
Maybe it was just, to use a surfing metaphor, since we're all beach guys, but we didn't get to go to the ocean to live. I at least get surfing metaphors. But sometimes when you're surfing and there's no waves, and then all of a sudden you get a gut feeling, paddle down the beach that way because a wave
Mhm.
is coming. And the same kind of thing where it was like, we really felt like God said, and I've never heard the audible voice of God, just to be clear, but just those like promptings and those nudgings from
Sure.
him. Paddle to Austin because I'm bringing a wave, and I don't
Mm.
make the wave. I'm making the wave, but I do need some churches to go catch it. I need some churches to go catch the wave, and we've seen nothing but evidence for that since getting here, just over
That's
5 years
amazing.
ago. Yep.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
So, side note, this is so wild, and I love how God confirms. I literally last week just hosted the founder of Catch the Wave Prayer Paddles,
No way.
and he just spent a weekend in Austin, but they take paddle boards out on big bodies of water and pray over the city. And it's so neat that that's like confirmed of God saying, no, this wave is coming.
Mhm.
And whether or not you choose to surf it or ride it,
Right.
whatever that looks like, paddle out, hop on.
Yep, yep, and so much of it, there was a wave of church plants about 20 years ago in Austin, and
Mm,
it's such a kingdom-minded, unity between all the churches and pastors
cool.
here. A lot of times you go to cities and you almost feel like this competition between churches, like,
Hmm.
this is our turf, but I think, 'cause Austin is growing so fast and desperately needs Jesus, like, really bad, pastors and churches were like, for the last 20 years since that first wave, they've been praying for the second wave. And so we show up to Austin and find out like we actually have been prayed for the last 20 years.
That's so
And
cool.
yeah, and even like my mentor here in Austin, a guy named Will, and he kind of found me like through a few connections right when we moved here. And he's, around 60 years old, and was part of that first wave of church plants and has been doing this as a pastor in Austin for the last, 20, 25 years. And he said, "You're my guy." He's like, "I'm taking you under my wing." And he's like, how much your church and you guys being here has been prayed for over the last 2 decades.
Wow.
And so a part of that wave, it's humbling, it's like we didn't make this wave. We just had a willingness to paddle here and catch,
Mhm.
you know.
I
So
love it. Well, stepping into a dream is always exciting for anybody, like literally at any level.
yeah.
But I know it's incredibly hard work, which you had referenced that earlier. What can you say, if anything, to someone who is pursuing a dream that they believe, something they've always prayed for, whether it's a calling and purpose that they're pressing into, but they're also wondering whether or not it's worth the hard work? What would you say? I mean, you're 5 years in, which caveat, side note, I had the chance to attend Red Rocks Austin when I was there back in June, and the room was packed, and it's
Mhm,
very evident that the people of Austin want to
mhm.
be there.
Oh,
So
yeah, big time, big time. That's so cool. It was fun to have you guys there too. It was like such a different chapter, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and
Mm,
it's neat because it's as you were saying, like, I remember the first time I went to Red Rocks in Denver, and I
mhm,
remember what seat I sat in. I remember
mhm.
hearing from God saying, like, "Plug in, get involved, jump into the Littleton."
Yeah,
It was when Sean announced the Littleton campus from Heritage Square Theme Park.
yeah. Uh-huh,
And so
uh-huh.
we all have ridden through, like, the expansion of Red Rocks, but then to see God do it through you guys in Austin and being like, "This feels like home,"
Yeah,
it's home away from home.
yeah.
But so how would you encourage somebody if they are down the road of pursuing what they believe is a call from the Lord? Like
Yeah, I would say, 'cause I honestly, I feel like I'm still in the middle of that. You know what I mean? Where it's, like, still the grind and it's still the hustle season, and just reminding yourself, like and you get little hints and little windows where you get to step back and sorta look at it and go, "Okay, this is worth the blood, sweat, and tears. I will
mhm,
not regret the blood, sweat, and tears. I will not regret taking a risk. I will not regret not choosing to play it safe. It will always feel scarier and harder and tougher and more pressure in the moment. But even if this fails, like I'll be better for it. You know
mm,
what I mean? It'll make me better. Yeah. And I would say to anybody who's thinking about pursuing something, or you might feel like I have this calling on my heart, and that can be such a good word and a bad word. It can be so one of those things that helps us just stay right where we're at always because God is almost about to do something
mm,
and he is just always for some reason almost about to do something
mm.
because then we sort of keep him at like an arm's distance and it's safer. It's kind of like like having a dog is different than the idea of having a dog. The idea of having a dog's great, but then
Sure.
finally having one and having a puppy, it's like, okay, I have to change my life, my schedule, everything for this because I'm actually doing it. And I feel like it's the same idea with callings. They're awesome to talk about as an idea,
Mm,
but it's completely a different thing when you take that step and or the first like 10, 20 steps and you sort of the point of no return and I'm giving myself to this is hard and scary and the future you will say thank you, you know, even if it goes different than you planned, which it probably
totally.
will. But then I would say to anybody who's maybe in it or, you know, a few months in or a few years in, the biggest enemy I believe with this kind of stuff is the double-minded spirit
Hmm.
where I talk to young couples, you know, our church in Austin is so young, so I do so many weddings. I do a lot of marriage counseling, which I feel like I shouldn't be giving marriage counseling because my wife and I are in marriage counseling,
No, you
but
guys have a great marriage.
yeah, like, I have a lot to say and things learned the easy way and the hard way, you know? But I always tell young couples either right before their wedding or, you know, the year after it, this is actually hard by design and it doesn't mean just because it's hard doesn't mean you chose wrong. It's just hard because it's marriage. Marriage,
Mm,
it's amazing, but it's challenging. But when you have the double-minded spirit where you start to think, maybe I chose wrong,
hmm,
that makes it 10 times harder.
yeah.
That is subconscious soul torture.
Mm,
And if you can get rid of like, no, 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 I'm here and I'm all in on this. It's still hard, but it's now the correct kind of difficult where it's difficult because I'm working on this and I'm getting better at this. But the same thing when we picked a city, I felt like we're supposed to move to Austin. However, had we moved to San Diego, people need Jesus in San Diego.
yeah.
If we went to Phoenix or, Nashville or Orlando, people need Jesus everywhere. So God, you're not going to ruin his plans for your life. I think the only way we miss God's plans is when we don't do anything.
Totally.
And God can't steer a parked car. And so just be driving. He's so good at getting you to where he wants you to go. But we got that advice, when you pick a city, don't look back. If you get there and it's challenging, it's because it's supposed to be by design. So you
Mm,
rely more on God's strengths instead of yours. But if you have that double-minded spirit of, man, maybe we were supposed to be in San Diego and maybe I heard from God wrong and maybe I messed up his plans. you're gonna live in a constant state of fear and paralysis and brake pedal, and that's just torture for your soul. It's the same thing when we chose our building. Like, which building are we gonna rent to set up and tear down every single Sunday? It's going to be hard and a grind at all of them. And a better option is probably going to come up 6 months from now. But we are all in here. And it's the same
Wow.
thing like with marriage. It's like, this is going to be amazing, not because you chose the one person on the entire planet that you're compatible with. She's the
Mhm.
one because you chose her. He's the one because you chose him. It's going to be amazing because you water the grass where you are, and you work it and you grind it out, and there's blood, sweat, and tears, and you sow into this.
Mhm.
Thing with a calling. It's like, don't be double-minded. Pick and then be all in for it. And if God has something else for you past that, he's really good at letting you know. He's not a God
Yeah.
of confusion. But don't let that spirit of, that's in James chapter 1. The
Yeah.
double-minded spirit, it's like you're a boat in the sea during a storm, being thrown about in the waves and the wind without an anchor, and just, should I have done that? Should I have done that? And it's a terrible way to walk in a calling. you know
Yeah.
that's why comparison is such a dangerous thing to other people's callings. It's like, no, what is God giving you to do? Be all in for it. And if it's hard, that's the design, and that's a good,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good word. I feel like that's a good word for so many listeners, including myself, of just jumping in and committing to something. And God, in light of what you just talked about in your series on the pendulum, is God sovereign or do we have free will?
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
And the fact that God is so sovereign that even when we make choices that potentially we could question, did I make the wrong decision? To not put that past the Lord to rearrange the trajectory of our life. When he wants us to get somewhere,
Yeah.
he will gently,
Yeah.
take us there.
Yeah.
And I love what you talked about this last week of like pressing into the mystery of God. And because we don't want a God that we can understand. And so, like what you said about God is not a God of confusion, he's not.
Hmm.
But then you made that very strong point of like, he's a God of mystery. And that's what we want
Right.
because it
Right.
leads us to worshiping him. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. It'd be boring to have a God that completely makes sense to us. You can't really worship that God.
totally.
And so, yeah, so make sure you distinguish between those two things. Oh, he's a God of confusion. No, no, no. He's a God of mystery. There's a beauty to that.
Hmm.
And so let him be that. Because if you can let him be a God of mystery, he won't be the God of confusion to you. But I'm
Yeah.
still learning that. I'm all the time tempted, like, man, San Diego sounds the weather right now in Austin's 105. And San Diego's probably 83 and sunny
Yeah.
with a nice ocean breeze right now. But I'm here. I'm here.
You also pay the sunshine tax in California. So
Oh, big
it's
time.
a little
Yes.
heftier of a price.
Yep, you sure do.
Okay, so the places between the podcast is all about transitions,
Mhm.
and you addressed a lot of those things of like, transitioning in life from college to marriage or marriage to kids. And so God is clearly faithful in all of our stories. In every transition, as humans, we know what it's like to wait. In the last handful of years for you, you've been through a lot of transitions. Any tips for dreaming with God and considering his faithfulness in those transitions?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, I'll say this, but then I'll rewind a little bit and give some balancing statements for it. Trust your God instinct.
Mm,
There's that scripture that says the sheep know the sound of the shepherd's voice. And so, first of all, you can't have that fear of, I'm going to mess up God's plans for me, because then
yeah.
you'll I think we drop the God card a lot because we're afraid of actually owning and making decisions,
Hmm.
where God is saying, no, 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 be confident in this. You make a decision on left or right. I think we so often wait for the audible voice and for certainty. And God is saying, I would actually love to sit down with you and get out a pen and get out some paper and design your future with you. I've given you free will for a reason.
Yeah.
And let's write this next chapter together. So be ready to make some decisions and not feel like you even have to drop the God card so that he owns it and not you. It's like, no, no, no. I made this decision with God, and I sought wise counsel, and I prayed about it, and get close to him, and then trust your God instinct as best as you can. I remember a few months before we moved, I don't know if I've told you this story before, but it was after young adults one night, Thursday evenings, Red Rocks Church, Lakewood campus in Lakewood, Colorado. And I always locked up at the end. And I was in the middle of trying to make this decision, San Diego, Austin, somewhere else. I don't know. A lot of people are affected by this decision. How the heck am I
Yeah.
supposed to make this decision? And trying so hard to hear from God. And I was just drained. It was like 10:30 p.m. Decision fatigue is a real thing. That's why sometimes it's just good. Make like 3 decisions this week. You'll feel like you spent a week at a spa. You're just avoiding decisions. Just make them and go with it. Because I remember getting in my car, turning on the alarm, getting in my car, and I pulled out of the parking lot, and I felt in my gut, I was like, I'm supposed to go back because the front doors are unlocked. And it was very weird. I don't. Once again, it wasn't audible. I just was like, I tried to ignore it and I kept driving. And then once again, it was like, no, 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 go back. I think the front doors might be unlocked. And the front
Mm.
doors being unlocked, that was never my job. We have a safety team, a security team that locks up at the end of every night. But I think just so I could sleep soundly that night, I was like, fine. I was just at the end of a long day. I was like, I'll go back. And I pull up to the front of the campus and I like park my car up on the sidewalk, just mad. And I get out of the car and I go up and to grab the doors to the front of the Lakewood campus and almost say out loud, see God, they're locked. And I pull them and they just opened. And all of a sudden the alarm starts like counting down. I can hear I have 30 seconds to sprint to the back of the building and turn it off.
Oh, no.
And I was like, I locked everything up and then I reset the alarm and I drove home. And the whole way home, I cried a lot on that drive because it had nothing to do with doors. Nobody was going to break in that night. I wasn't like a hero it was God showing me, you know what I sound like, you
Mm.
know my voice. And if it's a small thing like this or a huge thing, like where to move to start a church, my voice sounds the same. If you can swim in the shallow end, you can swim in the deep end. You can swim in the middle of the ocean. Swimming's the same thing. Even if it feels like the stakes are higher and deeper beneath you, swimming is the same thing. So get close to God, trust your God instinct because you have one, and then and make a decision,
Yeah.
and then have some confidence in your calling, and don't be double minded, and go all in for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. What a wild story.
Yeah, it was it was I still think about that from time to time, like, I have to remind myself, "That wasn't a dream, that really
Totally.
happened," and I know the sound of his voice.
Totally.
Yeah.
We've reflected on that a lot recently, and I don't need to get into the long story of it because I want to honor your time and our listeners. But we had a total God experience in Austin the Monday after church,
Hmm.
and we had reflected on it for the days to come. And we were like, that's just evidence that God can speak and God can move in a moment's notice and not questioning these bigger things that we're waiting on, the places between how many people are like, God, I just wish I had my dream job, or God, I wish I was married, or God, I wish I could have grandbabies. Well, like you need to go through the steps and the processes.
Right. Right.
And when you hear God or see God move in a small way, but it is so evident
Yeah.
that it's God moving,
Yeah.
that gives you a lot more courage and faith to believe him for the other things.
Yes, absolutely. And to hear him and to walk with him today, even before you get to all those seasons you're looking forward to, because and it's John 15, like remain in me. And I think
Mm.
that's one of the hardest things for us to do is remain where we are. I think for me, since moving here, it's not that scary for me to pack up and move. I've done that so many times in my life, and I kind of get like a rush from it. But the idea of like, okay, let's put some roots down
Mhm.
has always just like terrified me to death.
Mm,
And so since staying here for 5 years,
yeah.
it's actually the scarier thing to do. But it teaches you. It's like we all think like as soon as I get there, as soon as I get to that relationship or have, a kid or move to that city, I'll find what I'm looking for.
Mm,
It's not here, it must be there. But you never learned how to be here.
Mhm.
So when you get there, you'll be there, but you won't know how to be there because you don't know how to be here. And it's always going to be now, wherever it is that you are. And so if you don't learn how to be here now, then you won't be there when you get there. And it'll be once again over the next horizon and the next season. And that's like God's calling is always out there at a distance. But it's that, it's that quote, the grass isn't greenest over there, it's greenest where
Mhm.
you water it, like the magic you're looking for isn't over the next horizon, it's in the ground beneath your feet. If you can like dig it up where you're at
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard
Yeah.
to, that's a hard, I feel like I'm like having a therapy session with myself a little bit because I needed to hear that, you know what I mean? And so I am not a master of this. I've
No,
just
yeah.
a lot of it the hard way and need that reminder a few times a week, the magic
Yeah.
beneath your feet in the ground. Here's a shovel, dig it up today.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, last question, since we just got done with therapy.
Yeah, for real.
Um, what place would you say you're between? And then how can we pray for you? Be it you and Sam and the kids,
Mm.
Austin, Red Rocks Church, you choose what you want to share.
We're sort of at a checkpoint maybe where we now have to start thinking like, okay, so there's a verse in Joshua where Joshua is leading a couple million, Israelites to the promised land and they have to
Mm,
go through the Jordan River and all of that stuff. And there's a verse where he says, I've never been this way before. I've never been this far before.
mhm.
I've never done this before. And that's been my verse this year for me
Mm,
personally. Like is where we're at right now with our church and the decisions we're needing to make now, of we have a building that's full. And where do you go from here? I've never done this before. I've never been this far before. I've never been this way before. So it's kind of exciting and it's terrifying at the exact same time.
yeah,
So I'm in a space between or a place between, but I don't necessarily know. I know what the next place is that I'm on the verge of. And so I'll take prayer for clarity and for some vision. And I feel like God's having me trust him a little bit because I'm such I'll go knock on doors and make the phone calls and I'll knock down doors if I have to. And he's saying, no, 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 I am going to speak to you through opportunities, but I need you, buddy, to just like sit and be with me and trust. And so I
yeah,
don't know what the place is. Um, but I know God has me just trusting that he's got it like right around the corner. And so clarity, patience, and some vision. And just to like, once again, our current building, we the verse or the not the verse, it's just a phrase that our staff came up with is like wring it out. And it's how like
mm,
sometimes you have like a soaking wet washcloth and you wring out until you get every last drop. Where what God has given us right now to steward, we're just going to wring out every last drop in the name of stewardship. Everything we can get out of this and everything we can build and the people we can reach with what we have, we're going to do that. Trusting that verse of like those who are faithful with what they have will be
yeah,
trusted with the next place. And
yeah.
so
That's
that's
so good.
yeah. So waiting with patience, needing clarity and vision.
Absolutely. Well, listeners, as you tune in and Doug is sharing this word, I would just encourage you to stop and pray for him. And even just right now, yeah, God, we just ask that you would bless Red Rocks Austin and all of the endeavors of the staff, and that you would give supreme wisdom and guidance as you lead Doug and Ethan and Ryan and their families just into the next steps of what you want to do for your kingdom in Austin and beyond. And just thank you for the words that he got to share today, and just ask that you would pour out your favor and your blessing before him. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Wendy, thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Doug, thank you so much. Listeners, I will tag Red Rocks Austin in our show notes and a little bit more about how you can learn more and follow up with Doug. But just want to thank you for tuning in. Doug, thank you for your time, and we'll
Hey,
catch you
I'm
again soon.
honored, Wendy. Thank you so much.